Welcome to the 18th episode of Rivanna Review, a program of stories, features, and book reviews. My name is Robert Boucheron.
And my name is Curtis Gill. We will be your hosts for the half hour of reading excerpts aloud with illustrations and author photographs.
The print magazine Rivanna Review is published 4 times a year in Charlottesville, Virginia, on the Rivanna River. I am the editor. The magazine is available in bookstores on the Main Street Mall in Charlottesville and elsewhere in Virginia. You can order a copy or a subscription from the website rivannareview.com.
Contributors to the magazine live all over the world, and they write about places far and wide. In this episode, we will visit a deserted fairground in Rochester, Minnesota at night, a camp of feral dogs in California, the night train from Amsterdam to Zurich, a painter and his family in Naples, Italy, and a diving accident in Lake Michigan.
In a video clip, Mitchell Taves in Manitoba will read aloud from his new book of stories, Pinching Zwieback.
Story, Tomatoes at Night by Mary Lewis. Alma wandered out onto the empty field at dusk to escape the motel, her laptop, the calls she had to make, all that dark emptiness in the middle of Rochester, Minnesota, home of the Mayo Clinic. Not a park where people strolled and picnicked, but the county fairgrounds. It must have been at the edge of town at one time, before the suburbs engulfed it. At one side stood an old corncob water tower that was saved from destruction. Yellow kernels reached skyward, like the monster of all the corn cobs in this land of corn and soybeans. She took a picture, for no reason, maybe to steady herself. Yesterday, Alma left her students in mid-lecture at the University of Minneapolis. The topic was history, events leading to the Civil War. Her mother had been rushed by ambulance to the ICU from her home in Preston, 30 miles away. A stroke, they said, after a collapse at the nursing home where she worked as a nurse. She was in the middle of evaluating a resident. Alma entered her own crisis during that harried drive. Only 2 hours, but it felt like 10. And now it was all over. Alma spread her arms high to the few stars in the fuzzy half-moon. A haze of moisture touched her skin with quiet droplets. The big cry hadn't come yet, but it could at any moment. She headed across the dim field towards the darker shapes of distant buildings. They turned out to be large sheds with open walls, livestock exhibits. On one was a big sign in extravagant capitals, Miracle of Life. All those chicks and calves and lambs in the damp closeness with the scent of milk and hay. The best place to be at a county fair. A dozen piglets nursing from the great mound of Mama Sow, but empty now. As was the gray hulk of the grandstand and the vast lawn where the cars of summer would park and the bullet ride would lunge in endless circles. Walking between the barns out again to a field, she needed another goal. A lighted place at the outer rim of the grounds, a sort of electrical substation. It would do. She took her time as though she really had it to spend. She walked along a gravel road for cars, along a ditch with a concrete waterway, then by a hedge so dense it could be a fence. White light revealed every detail of the steel struts, like scaffolding, bristling wires and metal boxes. Long pointed things looked like curly Q pasta, circuit breakers or insulators, too bright for her dark adapted eyes. She turned away and discovered something to the side. Tomato plants. Why? To take up the nighttime light? Sunshine not good enough for them? A dozen plants, at least, laden with oval fruit. Paste tomatoes, the only kind worth canning. Anything else and you're canning a lot of water, her mother used to say. Mom would ladle steaming tomatoes from a huge vat on the stove into waiting jars, while Alma, as a child and even last year as a 40-year-old, moved the funnel from one jar to the next, then wiped the rims before tonging the lids over them. Mom would finish the job by twisting the ring on tight, those capable hands, now cold. She looked at those nighttime tomatoes again, so burdened with heavy fruit. Some red, but mostly green. They'd never ripened before fall. Pepper plants, too. Some were skinny peppers that had to be hot. Is that why no one had picked them?
Story, Dazzle's Christmas Miracle by Scott Bradfield.
Dazzle found pine needles tickled his paws. Eggnog made him groggy, and there was something about advent calendars that fell flat on his ears. like the promises of politicians at election time. And yet, the more Dazzle disdained Christmas, the more his angry dad took it to heart. It was like they lived on different planets. Dazzle's dad began barking just before winter solstice, like a mid-management control freak at a company picnic.
We'll put the great tree over there and the Yule log over there. Anatole, gather more pine cones. Felicia, dump all the red berries into that pot. As for the rest of you guys, listen up. We've only got 3 days to make this the most memorable Christmas ever. And if you don't pull your weight, I'm going to rip a hole in your collective butts big enough for the moon to show through.
It was as if the season elicited some kind of hyper-obsessive from the back of Dad's brain. Perhaps it was a hormonal reaction to the lack of sunlight, or perhaps it was just the miserable old dog's way of keeping warm. Dad would came to a stop in front of Dazzle like a drill sergeant in front of a sloppy recruit.
What the hell are you looking at, son? Somebody's got to get these unruly kids in line, or they'll spend their lives hanging around the campfire eating Cheetos and hobnobs. They'll grow fat, lazy, and disrespectful of authority. They'll wander down to Highway 1 and get hit by a bus, or start mixing with wolves and coyotes, and you know where that leads. Howling at the moon. I mean, just look at your useless mate over there, snoring away like a clogged garbage disposal. Edwina, hey, Edwina, I'm talking to you. Move your lazy butt away from the fire. That blanket is for warming the great beast's posterior when he arrives on Christmas Eve. Now, where did I hide the Bacardi from last year? Was it north of the Big Rock or south of the old oak tree?
Watching Dad, Dazzle reflected, was like watching a version of himself back when he thought he could still change the world. All conviction and momentum, always hurtling towards a blunt, immovable object.
More tinsel! More candles! Somebody wrap crepe paper around that bush. Where's the iPod with our Christmas playlist? And Edwina, what did I say about moving your lazy butt off that blanket?
It was a rare and pleasant sight to see the old girl move so quickly in these dark winter evenings, Dazzle thought, especially when she was ripping holes in a butt that wasn't his. When Dazzle was young, he didn't know his dad, who lived behind a Krispy Kreme donut shop on Ventura Boulevard and barked at any dog who ventured near his territory. But since joining their anarcho-syndicalist federation of mutts in the high mountains, Dad thrived in his self-appointed role of venerable ancestor, doling out wisdom like master doling out treats, especially when it came to his half-remembered, half-manufactured tales of the great beast. Small, bright eyes and wagging tails assembled around him at night as he held forth.
In olden days, the great beast was just like you or me. He ran wild in the woods. He played with the wildcats and beavers, and he enjoyed life in a forest abundant in natural resources. Then, just when everything seemed perfect, the human being showed up. He was hairy all over like a dog, but smelled worse. He peed and crapped on everything. If something looked tasty, he took a bite and threw the rest on the ground. The only thing he enjoyed more was shooting animals. Enough is enough, the great beast decided, and on a dark winter night, guided by the blazing star of justice, he snuck into the human being's campsite and tied him up with barbed wire. He piled Yule logs around him and set them ablaze, and when everyone awoke the next morning, the great beast had already vanished off to his new home on the moon, where he howled down every night, "Respect your elders, especially me, and when the night grows cold at the end of the year, I'll be back. Ow-woo! Ow-woo!"
By the time Dad concluded, the pups were asleep beside the flickering fire, all except the brightest and most percipient of them, young Dexter, who resembled a mixed lab terrier poodle.
Essay, Night Train from Amsterdam to Zurich by J.R. Patterson. Last year I was in Amsterdam, but Christmas was in Switzerland. I was loath to fly, lines of anxious passengers fumbling with baggage, security checks, delays. No, I didn't want that kind of stress. I'd come to the Netherlands from England by boat, crossing the channel from Harwich to the Hook of Holland. Then I'd traveled across the country by train from Delft to Wageningen, Zwolle, and Utrecht, always arriving on time and happy. I would take the night train to Zurich. The Netherlands is a country made for viewing from a passing train. The neatness of the streets, the low, foggy marshes trimmed with sedge grass, the pruned borders between village and farmland, where long-legged cyclists pedal between green fields. The entire country feels made with the model railroader's eye for detail. Even the language, with its jumble of vowels and throaty G's, imparts a curious pleasure to railway announcements. No one can say tot ziens, goodbye, without smiling. That's just what I was doing at 8:30 as the OBB night jet rolled out of Amsterdam Central. I popped the small bottle of chilled Italian sparkling wine that was waiting for me in my cabin. The OBB, or Österreichische Bundesbahnen, is Austria's federal railway. Its night jet line covers a wide network across Central Europe. From the hub in Vienna, travelers can journey through the night to Berlin, Paris, Rome, and Brussels. Other lines run between outpost stations like Innsbruck and Hamburg, Stuttgart, and Venice. The train I was on runs between Amsterdam and Zurich. Night trains are going through a resurrection across Europe. Travelers wanting an overnight train were once spoiled for choice, with dozens of sleepers across the continent, London to Paris on the night ferry, the Blue Train across southern France, the Aurora down the Italian peninsula. These lines and more were abandoned, while others traded usability for nostalgic opulence. The Orient Express, the once affordable journey from London to Istanbul, today costs around $4,000 per night. This trip on the night jet was a reasonable $80, not much more than the cheapest flights over the same distance. You have the ability to move about and freely bring aboard any luggage. Compare that to kneecaps jammed against the folding table tray and roulette games, overbooking, canceled flights, luggage fees, and random seat assignment. The time difference wasn't so bad, a little under 12 hours on the train. The 1.5-hour flight would have consumed far more time than advertised. All I had to do was arrive at the train station and hop aboard. As if to prove the difference in convenience, I asked the steward about last call when she came to collect my completed breakfast card. You have a choice of meats, cheeses, breads, and spreads. Whenever you want, she said, with a shrug, as though it was nothing to order a bottle of brandy at 4 a.m. She gave me a quick tour of the compartment, the wardrobe, the sink, the toilet, the lights. In his 1944 essay, Progress and Change, E.B. White called a train cabin, quote, perfect in conception and execution, this small green hole in the dark moving night, this soft warren in a hard world. This was that, a buffer between me and a world that would only get colder as we traveled south and rose into the Alps. There was a second bunk, made up in crisp white sheets, and I waited expectantly for cabin mates to arrive, but I was still alone when the final whistle blew and the train glided forward. Book review by Robert Beauregard, The House on Via Gemito, novel by Domenico Starnone. When Mimi, short for Domenico, was growing up in working-class Naples just after World War II, family life revolved around his father's obsession with art. Ferreri was convinced that he was a supremely talented painter and boasted that a famous American silent film star once told him, "Fred, your talents are wasted here. You have a better eye than anyone. You see things that no one else sees. You have the gaze of the Padre Eterno, and you exist to show us its beauty through your painting. Listen to me, leave this shitty country. Come meet me in Hollywood." Ferreri never traveled to the United States, nor did he ever receive the fame he believed he deserved. In complaints endlessly repeated, his destiny was blocked by the envy of other painters, the ignorance of art critics and gallery owners, familial obligations, his full-time job with the railroad, and his wife's failure to support his aspirations. The setbacks he endured were the fault of others, while his successes were due to his efforts alone. When his ambition was thwarted or his stories questioned, he flew into a rage. Mimi lived in the shadow of his father's alleged accomplishments and in fear of his father's anger. Quote, "I never recalled warm, loving feelings for him," unquote. Told from Mimi's point of view, The House on Via Gemito is a coming-of-age novel featuring the father as the protagonist rather than the son. Starnone is concerned here with the elusiveness of memory. The novel mostly takes place in the small apartment on Via Gemito that Mimi shares with his parents, 4 siblings, and maternal grandmother. Ferrari has pushed aside the furniture to make room for his easels, canvases, brushes, and paints. In this makeshift studio, the family lives as intruders. Propelling the story is Ferrari's overwhelming need to control the narrative of his life. At a young age, Mimi realizes that his father's stories shift as they are retold, with crucial facts deleted or shaped to fit how Ferrari wants to remember and be remembered. To him, reality is merely suggestive. And despite Mimi's head being filled with Ferrari's word and thoughts, quote, he wants me to believe he knows everything, unquote. Mimi lacks a sense of who his father really is. This wonderfully engaging book begins when Mimi questions whether his father ever beat his mother. There is evidence, a swollen eye, a bruise. One day, a teenager and enraged by the thought, Mimi tells his mother, "I want to kill him." She replies with a lopsided grin, "You are even dumber than your father." Mimi will never fully sort out whether his father was solely in charge of Teatro Bellini after the war, whether he knew the famous actor Douglas Fairbanks Jr., whether Ferrari once drew illustrations for the communist newspaper La Voce del Mezzogiorno, and whether he fought at the Russian front. Then there is Mimi's remembrance of his father's large-scale painting, The Drinkers, and his attempt to determine whether it ever hung in the Positano town hall. Mimi resigns himself to uncertainty. Reluctantly, he decides to accept the image that Ferrari wanted to portray of himself, pay homage to it, and behave as though I was going to see his art in a famous gallery. As the novel progresses, we begin to admire Ferrari's ambition and social savvy, and we question Mimi's telling. Who is the unreliable narrator here, the father or the son? Beautifully written and deeply insightful about the stories people tell themselves and others, this is a book to which to surrender.
Book review by Robert Beauregard, The Diver, novel by Samson Knight. When someone who is deeply loved dies, most people find solace in cherished memories, photographs, an heirloom, burial sites. Others want the loved one to speak from the beyond, make a ghostly appearance, or acknowledge their presence by blinking the lights or moving the furniture. The Diver is about the others, their grief and descent into the occult. At the center is Peter, a former art student and now paralegal, who's drifting through life, socially inept, living in disarray, and self-centered to the point of being oblivious to the feelings of others. Peter is also aggressively indecisive. In every situation of importance, he cannot decide whether to speak or remain silent, leave or stay. I wanted to look away, but understood that I couldn't. I understood that I wasn't supposed to be there. I stayed at the party too long. Peter is a victim of events. 2 women in Peter's life refuse to accept the death of someone close. One is his mother, Beatrice, whose oldest son and Peter's brother committed suicide for reasons which remain opaque. Beatrice wants to believe that Henry is still with us. The other is Marta, whose husband Robert died accidentally, or maybe not, during a diving trip they took to explore a sunken shipwreck in Lake Michigan. Marta wants Robert back. With Peter as his narrator, Knight weaves together these accounts of loss, obsession, and dissociation. Peter works for an investigative law firm, Masterson, and Zell, which has been hired by Marta's sister-in-law, Evelyn, to punish Marta for her involvement in Robert's death, and to prevent Marta from withdrawing more money from the family trust. Peter, in one of his most thoughtless acts, tells Marta that Evelyn and the law firms are conspiring to make her life difficult. The decision leads him via his subsequent involvement with Marta further into the supernatural. Searching for Henry, Peter and his mother visit a rabbit-sacrificing mystic. You're excited to speak to your brother too. Admit it. Beatrice frequently disappears from home, only to be found sitting alone in a roadside motel. On one occasion, she travels into the California desert to take a psychedelic drug. Marta is determined to reunite with Robert. In one tensely written scene, she eviscerates her dog in a candlelit room while convincing Peter to chant incantations. This is not my body. This is not my blood. This is not my ankle. This is not my thumb. Marta believes Peter is the medium who will put her in touch with her deceased husband. At one point, she asks Peter to be Robert, and because he is falling in love with her, he agrees. By the end of the book, Marta has recovered her husband's body and fled reality altogether. I won't reveal more except to mention that neither Henry nor Robert rejoined the living. Knight is a graduate of the Iowa Writers Workshop and a management professor at the University of Toronto. In his debut novel, he has taken a complex plot and added a wealth of description, digressions, like a brief commentary on Freud and the uncanny, diagrams and images like a wanted poster for Archie or Marta's ostensibly missing dog. All of his fiction writing skills are on display, from robust imagery to genre shifts to non-textual flourishes. By making The Diver a demonstration of the range of his perceptual and writing skills, however, Knight has diminished an otherwise intriguing story.
Hi, I'm Mitch Taves. Here's a story about two young boys. They are best friends, but one, Lenny, is angry at the other, Matt, because he has told their class at school a secret about him. We join the action just as Matt's grandmother arrives to find a fist fight has broken out at the edge of her garden on a beautiful September Saturday in 1965, small town Manitoba. This excerpt is from a story called The Raspberry Code, from my book of short stories, Pinching Sweeback. "Stop this now," she said. Then she asked, "Who hit first?" her head turning owlishly from Lenny to me and back. "Who?" I looked down, as did Lenny. "Me, Grandma," I confessed quietly after a too long pause, my eyes still down. Lenny immediately looked up at her and said evenly, "I told him so," pointing to his red chin. "How many times? How many punches?" she said urgently, looking at Lenny, imploring the truth. "Just once, Mrs. Zayn," he offered, looking at me a little stink-eyed, because he was starting to suspect that because of Grandma's apron-flying arrival, I was going to get a pardon. "Matthew," she said, "is this so?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't ma'am me, young. Is that true? One punch?" "Yo, Grandma," I said, nodding gravely. "Na yo," she said, pivoting sharply to spin her body behind me, planting her palms on my shoulders and clamping down with clothes-pin fingers to hold me still. "You," she demanded. "Lenny, you hit him back, and then the fight is over." Lenny took a half-step back, glancing first at me, then up at the square-jawed, flower-dusted, praying mantis that held me immobile in her grip. His head oscillated in slow motion, a no. She continued decisively, "Maddie hit you, you hit him. Fight over. Shake hands and come in for a piece of Saskatoon pie." Grandma, too, had a code. Before he could say no or move, she reached across and pulled him a little closer. Then she nudged me forward with her knees and pointed to my freckled chin. "Right here, Lenny. One good one." Lenny stroked his jaw, still hurting, I hoped, with childish pride, in a pose that unconsciously copied his father's deliberate way of pondering an issue. He looked closely at me with Grandma's sturdy Prussian finger targeting my chin. "I won't tell," Grandma added, a sparkle in her eye that Lenny caught but could not process. Then finally she concluded irresistibly, "Pie and ice cream." As Lenny pulled back to deliver his best hockey haymaker, Grandma released her hold on my shoulders and I could hear her breath as she sucked it keenly through her teeth. I let my head turn and my legs buckle the way Dad had shown me, and so the punch did little damage. Either that or Lenny had pulled it a little. Maybe some of both. I fell, landing hard on the square toe of Grandma's shoe, and that hurt more than my chin. Getting up, I saw that Lenny had a quizzical half smile on his face as he looked first at me, then at Grandma. She marched off briskly ahead of us, laughing and scolding all at once, telling Lenny to bring his bike away from the street and for us to wash our hands in the lawn sprinkler before we came in and leave our runners on the porch, and would he like to stay for night? I said, "Sorry I told," to Lenny. He nodded once emphatically and replied that he was sorry he got so mad. We had Saskatoon pie, our dishes and our lips stained purple. After we ate, Lenny felt my bicep and said, "You hit hard, Zayn." "You too, Gerbrant," I said back to him. "Let's not fight again. Have a cozy day. See you. Bye from Victoria, BC."